Well, good afternoon and welcome to Pay Increase Weekly Webinar. I'm Kathy Graham. I'm head of the HR Services area and I want to welcome you today. We're going to talk about the top 5 costly mistakes that employers make when it comes to COBRA. And I've put this little snake up there just to get your attention because it can rear its ugly head and cause you a lot of problems if you have a COBRA claim. The agenda today is we're going to go over some very basics of COBRA and then who is the governing agency, the responsible parties involved in all of this, the 5 costly mistakes that employers make, and what should employers do about COBRA. Now, I have, if you have a problem or a question, if you have a question, first of all, type it into the question box. We're going to answer all questions at the end. I do have my chat open too, though, so if you can't hear me or there are some technical difficulties, please let me know. So let's get started. All of our webinars are they're not legal advice. I want to make that clear. I'm not an attorney, but we give practical advice to HR and operations people so that they can do their job in a compliant way. So what we're giving today is just basically the facts about the subject. Okay, let's talk about the basics of COBRA. COBRA applies to all employers with 20 or more employees in the prior calendar year. And we know what COBRA is. It's been around since 1986. It is the ability for an employee that leaves or loses coverage at your company or one of their dependents to continue that coverage after they leave their job. And so COBRA applies to, back as I said, to all employers for the most part. And if you have fewer than 20 employees, there's almost every state in the United States has a mini COBRA law for those who don't have 20 employees. And a lot of them pattern their laws after the federal law. So if you don't know what the COBRA law is in your state, please just shoot me an email and I'll find out for you. One of the terms that you see a lot in COBRA is qualified beneficiary. It's a very important term. It's any person that's covered under an employer-sponsored health plan that loses their coverage due to a qualifying event. And qualifying event is a very important term. It's well defined, but anyone that's on your health insurance that loses it due to a qualifying event is entitled to continue their coverage. So what's a qualifying event? A qualifying event is one of the following events that causes the loss of health coverage. Just remember, if it's not on this list, it's not a qualifying event. So the first thing is termination of employment. If someone's terminated, they're allowed up to 18 months of continuation coverage. If someone's hours are reduced and they go into a status that is no longer benefit eligible, then they get 18 months of continuation coverage if they elect it. If they are divorcing or in some cases separation would apply, then the spouse would get, and the dependents would get up to 36 months if they're coming off the contract. A loss of dependent status, which occurs more rarely nowadays, is 36 months, and that's the 3-year limit. Loss of dependent status means someone ages out on the contract. The dependent becomes of age 26 or more because they can stay on the parent's health plans now until they're 26 years old. So once they turn 26, they lose that dependent status and need to be offered COBRA continuation. There's also an 11-month extension that's available for someone who has a qualified Social Security disability, someone who's on Social Security. So remember, if it's not on this list, It doesn't require you offer COBRA. If somebody comes in and drops their coverage, that doesn't require you to offer COBRA. If you're during open enrollment, somebody doesn't re-enroll, that's not a COBRA qualifying event. It has to be one of these things. And under COBRA, there are deadlines that are established. First of all, the plan administrator has 14 days from the date the coverage is lost to notify the qualified beneficiary or the person who's losing coverage or persons. And remember, it's from 14 days from the date they lose coverage, not the day that they leave the company. Sometimes your coverage will run until the end of the month, and so it would be 14 days after that. It's better to do it as quickly as possible because if someone really wants to continue their coverage because they have prescription drugs or illnesses that require they go to doctor's visits regularly, they're going to not want to wait 2 weeks to get their letter. The qualified beneficiary, or those you've notified, they have 60 days to elect coverage. And after electing that coverage, they have 45 days from the date that they make that election to pay the premiums retroactive to the last day of coverage. Do not reinstate their coverage before they pay you because you could get left holding the bag. You need to terminate them and reinstate them because a lot of people will elect COBRA within that 60 days because they think they might need it. But if it comes up to the 45-day mark and they haven't been to the doctor or don't need a prescription, then they may not pay you, which means that you cancel their coverage retroactively. It's called floating. So make sure you get the payment in your hand before you reinstate anyone. I know a lot of employers that have paid premiums that they really didn't have to. So let's talk about responsibility. Who is responsible for overseeing this law? It would be the Department of Labor. The penalties are significant. They can include also paying medical claims of someone who's not offered COBRA and can't get back on the health plan. So let's just say if you have penalties, the penalties that are assigned by the Department of Labor are $100 a day per qualified beneficiary. And that can add up to a lot of money over a short period of time. And also, if you forget to offer someone, for example, you forget to offer them COBRA, they're in a car accident, hospitals know to ask if they are in their COBRA election period or if they've been offered COBRA, if they tell them that they don't have coverage. They'll do the research and they'll find out whether or not they're in their election period, and they will elect their coverage for them. Hospitals have been known to pay for COBRA coverage so that they get their bills paid by the insurance company because anyone can pay for COBRA. It doesn't have to be the employee. So let's just say you forget to offer someone COBRA. It's been more than 2 months and your insurance company is not going to let you put them back on. The company that you work for is going to end up paying those medical bills, probably plus penalties and all kinds of other things. So it can be very expensive. And I will tell you that attorneys play a key role in COBRA claims because it's easy money. Been around for a long time. Everybody knows about it. If a hospital finds out someone doesn't have, wasn't offered COBRA, they will probably hand them the card of an attorney so that they can get the money to pay them. So attorneys there are lots of claims. This is probably the most the largest piece of legislation or litigation out there. It's very common to have a COBRA claim. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 costly mistakes that employers make. Mistake number one, not offering COBRA continuation for all health plans. So when we talk about health plans, we think of our medical plan, but that's not the case when it comes to COBRA. COBRA defines group health plan as any of the following plans. It can be your medical plan, which we expect. It can be your dental, your vision, your medical FSA, your health reimbursement account. It could even be an employee assistance plan or a wellness program if they provide some sort of medical care. So I know that we probably would agree with the top three, but when it comes to our medical FSAs and HRAs especially, companies don't realize that those are considered health plans under the IRS and Department of Labor rules, and that you have to offer COBRA for those plans. So let's talk about mistake number 2. Not sending out all required notices. This is a biggie. Lots of penalties for this too. There are 5 required notices as of the amendments of COBRA over the years. In 2006, I believe these amendments came out to require additional notices. First of all, there's the general notice, or initial notice, we call it. This is the notice that you have to send out within 90 days of someone enrolling in your health plan. It has to be sent to all parties that are covered under the plan. So you can't just hand it out at work and expect it to get home. It's supposed to be sent to the address, the home address of the employee. It tells the person what their rights are under COBRA and what to do if they have some sort of an event in their life that if they have a baby, it tells them who to notify, when to notify it, and what their the requirement is to notify, the limit on the number of days, whether it be 30 or 60, how long they have to report that newborn or adopted child or new family member. The thing of it is that if you don't give them this notice, you don't have the right to claim that they only had 30 or 60 days to enroll their new dependent. If they were never notified, the law looks at it as being the ball's back in your court. And if you need to be able to prove that you notified them also. And we'll talk about that proof of mailing a little bit later. So first of all, there's the general notice. Now here's the notice that everybody knows about. That's the qualifying event notice. That's the one that has to be sent out when someone loses their coverage. Then there is now a notice called the Notice of Unavailability of COBRA. In the case of, let's just say you have someone that is living in North Carolina and they're moving to Europe, and your coverage does not work well in Europe, or it doesn't work at all in Europe, then you need to send that person a notice that says that COBRA is not available to them outside of the country. Or if you are not going to offer COBRA because this person committed gross misconduct, which is another subject in itself, if you're not going to offer them COBRA, then you have to send them this notice. There's also a required notice of early termination of coverage under COBRA. If you terminate their coverage because they didn't pay, or the end of the term is coming up, I'm sorry, not the end of the term, but they are ending it early because they are eligible for Medicare at that time, then you have to tell them that you're terminating it early. Most of the time when you see this letter, it would be because someone has not paid for their coverage. You always have to send them a notice and let them know that you are terminating their COBRA early. There's also another required notice. If someone underpays you, and under the law it's considered insignificant, an insignificant amount, and that is defined in COBRA, which we're not going to go into today, but you have to let them know you didn't make a full payment and you can't cancel them. You have to let that payment, you have to give it a grace period of 30 days for them to make it up. And if they don't do it within the 30 days, you can cancel it, but you have to give them 30 days to make that underpayment. So these are all required notices. In an audit situation, all of these blocks have to be checked. Okay, let's look at mistake number 3. Companies not using the last known address when mailing a notice. COBRA law requires that you send the notice first-class mail to the last known address of the participant. That's all you're required to do. So if you don't update the addresses with your COBRA vendor, let's say you outsource COBRA, you don't update the addresses regularly, someone leaves, that participant may not be notified if they don't have a forwarding address, and the letter comes back. As if the letter comes back and it is the last known address you have, you're fine. But if you had an address that your vendor didn't have, that starts the trouble. So make sure you're updating your addresses. The company always bears the burden of the complaint that COBRA was not offered. It does not matter if your vendor notified the wrong address. If you had a different address, you would be considered to be at fault in this situation. Mistake number 4, you have to treat individuals on COBRA just the same as you do your employees. Under the COBRA law, you have to treat them as employees, and that means not forgetting them during open enrollment. It happens all the time. I know that I've been there myself. You come up on open enrollment, you're crazed to get all this stuff out, sorry, and all of a sudden, you realize that you have not notified your COBRA participants of the change in the cost. You have to allow them to make the changes to their elections at open enrollment. Just like you would employees, they can add coverages at that open enrollment time. And you have to notify them of new rates and plan changes when you notify employees. If you fail to notify a COBRA participant that their rates changed on January 1st, let's just say it's February the 15th, and you just realized you didn't send out any new rate information to your COBRA participants, then you can't increase their rates until the next month. You cannot make it retroactive under the law. And mistake number 5, not allowing qualified beneficiaries individual election rights. COBRA laws written to allow a child or a spouse to elect coverage without the employee. Each person is an independent qualified beneficiary, so each one of them could elect different coverages. The spouse could elect medical and dental. The employee could elect just dental. Children could elect just medical. The employee does not have to enroll for their spouse and children to do so also. I've come across this many times. If your insurance carrier tells you that can't happen, then that is against the law. So someone is telling you something that's not true. I was in a business prior to coming to Pay Entry, where I was head of a benefits administration division at a company, and we administered COBRA and FSAs and HRAs. So all of this is probably somewhat more familiar than HR law to me, because this is actually benefits law. There's some other things that you need to know when administering COBRA also. Make sure if you are terminating someone's coverage because you didn't get their payment on time, make sure you look at the postmark date on the envelope, because that determines everything. The Department of Labor looks at the postmark date. So if they mailed it before the 1st and it didn't get to you until, let's just say, the 10th day of the month because of the post office, you could not terminate their coverage on April the 2nd if you didn't get their payment on the 1st. You have to give it some grace time to make sure it comes through from the post office. So look at the postmark date. Anytime you terminate someone's coverage, hang on to that envelope. Don't send COBRA notices certified. You're only required to send them first-class mail, and sometimes the courts have held that it made the receipt of the COBRA notice more difficult because they may have to go to the post office and pick it up and don't have transportation or whatever, so don't send it certified. You do, however, if you are doing this yourself, you need to keep proof of mailing. This is your primary line of defense. If someone says you didn't mail a notice, you pull out your proof of mailing list for the day that you took COBRA notices to the post office. The post office has a form called proof of mailing. You write the name and the address of the person getting the notice, and the post office will stamp it so that it says it was sent. It's just one stamp on the page, and that is your line of defense to show that you mailed that letter or those letters. Some other key things to know, you need to audit your vendor's compliance. You are the one that's going to pay for their mistakes. But just because they're a large COBRA vendor does not mean that they don't make mistakes. Review the reports you receive for accuracy. We used to find it odd that people would not look at the reports that we sent them to make sure that we'd done our job right, to make sure that they had actually reported people who had left the company, because the employer may have forgotten to add somebody or to notify us that someone was gone. So make sure you look at your COBRA reports to make sure that the vendor is doing their job and that you are doing yours. And then one thing that's come up in the last 5 or 6 years is the vendor's compliance for the notices that they use. There are vendors out there that are using notices that don't comply with the Department of Labor's model notice. And there have been many court cases that have been won by the employees for insufficient notices. So if you want a copy of the Department of Labor's model notice, you can either email me or you can go to dol.gov/COBRA and you can find one there. But the notices, ask them for a copy of the notice that they send, their qualifying event notice. That initial notice, because some of the notices that are being sent out now reference websites where the employee can go and get further information, and they can't do that. They have to have all the information in that notice. Some people don't have access to internet and can't click on that link. So what should employers do? Okay, bottom line, just remember, you're the responsible party for any charges or claims that occur. If you do it in-house or if you have a vendor do it for you, the vendor cannot, if you read your contract, it will say in there that you're holding them harmless. Even if it didn't, the courts would not let them be responsible. The courts would say it is the employer's responsibility because that's the way that the law is written. And mistakes can cost your company thousands and thousands of dollars. The claims of 100,000 and more are not rare. I mean, it's more common than you would think. So be very careful. This is an area where employers do make a lot of mistakes. We have a full COBRA session coming up. It's in a 1-hour session on the COBRA law coming up in the next 90 days that will actually offer CE credits and HRCI credits if you need to have some credits for certifications. But if you're interested in COBRA as the full law, you can sign up for that at a later time. So as far as action items for employers, audit your current compliance. Don't just assume it's being done correctly. You should have a written policy of how your COBRA is handled internally. It's actually required by the COBRA law that you have a written policy that shows the process of when someone terminates, what happens next, who does what. And then make changes internally. If you need to make one person responsible for this or part of your system for notification needs to be changed, make sure you address that and don't put it off. And then if you have to, change vendors. Find a vendor that does it the right way and use them instead of the group that you're using. So I'm not selling COBRA today, but it is a very it's a high liability area, so you need to pay close attention to it. Okay, how about questions for the day? I'm going to open the questions box and see if anyone has one. Okay, let's see. If an employee only had dental coverage, do you send COBRA for medical and vision and vice versa? That is a very good question. No. When someone loses coverage, you only offer them continuation for that particular coverage. So if they only had dental, you just send them a COBRA notice for dental. That was a good question. Any other questions? And I'll remind you if you have one later, or you have something particular you don't want to ask now, then you can email me later. I'm being asked, do you have a sample COBRA policy you can send us? Yes, I will send one of those out to you, the person that asked, and make sure you get that. And I'll just send it to everyone who attended today um, so that you have a copy. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for attending today. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday at our weekly event. In the meantime, remember, um, as a payroll client, you have access to me outside of the HR services realm. You have access to give me a call, ask me for a form, ask me a quick question, um, and that's part of your payroll package. So if you need me, shoot me an email or give me a call. Um, Thanks for attending this afternoon and have a great day.